There are a lot of cool things that I could say about Lorelei Savaryn's conversion story this week on the show. A lot of places where she stopped and questioned her evangelical faith. The early church, what did it look like? The once saved, always saved. Am I really? And if I'm not, if I'm questioning things, do I believe in that doctrine, that underpinning, that foundational part of the Protestant faith that I'm a part of? Lots of things like that we could go into. Or the beauty of Lorelei and her husband JP's faith after becoming Catholic. The places they found were just gorgeous in practice and the rootedness and things that they began to understand and can pass on to their kids that the Catholic Church it teaches and that they can embrace. There's a lot to dig into here. But I think at its core, this is a story of somebody, Lorelei and her husband JP, who are truly wrestling with their faith. And as they begin to ask questions about their evangelical Christian faith, they are practicing. Of course, JP was raised Catholic and kind of began to wander from that faith as they themselves wrestle with these things. But in those inflection points, asking those very, very tough questions and coming up again and again with Catholic answers to those questions is what I think makes this story so fascinating. Because from all kinds of angles, when you ask those kinds of questions, and time and again, the Catholic Church has the most satisfying, logical, historically rooted answers, well, those things begin to add up. And in the end of the day, in Lorelei's case, the answer is, well, I'm becoming Catholic. That's the church that makes the most sense, that Christ founded, that has roots in history, that logically fits together. And then, wow, the things that opens up, the beauty of the sacraments, reconciliation, the Eucharist, theology of the body, the Catholic teaching on sexuality and marriage, these things are life-giving. It's an awesome story, guys. I think you will love it. Please watch. Please subscribe to the channel, do all those things you do, and enjoy. Hey friends, welcome back. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching there. Please subscribe to our channel, hit the bell, like the video, do all those fun things that you do on YouTube. And thanks for watching. If you're listening on podcast, please make sure you follow us on your podcasting app of choice. And if you are on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, please leave a rating or review. That helps to push the podcast out to new people and expand the listenership and help stories like this one reach more and more people. I am joined this week for a fantastic conversation with Lorelei Savaryn. She joyfully joined the Catholic Church in 2016 after many years as a Protestant. She lives outside of Chicago with her husband, 4 children, and a dog named Saint. I love that. She writes about faith and the family life on thiscatholicfamily.com and is also a children's author with 2 published books through Penguin Random House. Most recently, a Catholic retelling of The Secret Garden called The Edge of the In-Between. This is going to be a fantastic conversation, Lorelei. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the show, and hello.
Hello, I am so excited to be here. You actually played a part in my story, without you ever knowing who I was many years back. So I'm really excited to get the chance to actually talk to you.
Wow, you didn't say that before I met you, so this isn't really fair. It's like an ambush. I hope a good part, because the first article I ever wrote on my blog before I became Catholic, actually. So I became Catholic in 2015, so not long before you. And I wrote an article on a little tiny blog that I had at the time for friends and family called "What Sucks About the Catholic Church." And this is like my, and it was intended, like the punchline, you know this as a writer, the punchline was that I suck and I have to work on myself first too. But that of course was at the end of the article. And I led with the headline of "What Sucks About the Catholic Church." And that article on my tiny little blog went viral, and I had my first television spot on a bunch of different networks talking about this article. And I was like, wow, I hope that nobody knows me through just this article, and this is the guy that hates the Catholic Church or something, because that was, I don't know, it was a good article, I think.
That's awesome.
It was
That's
a little
amazing.
bit spicy. So I hope it wasn't that you first found.
It wasn't that one. That wasn't the first one that I found you through.
Oh, thank you. That's awesome. Okay, so you're a convert to the Catholic faith. You have an awesome story. I read a bit of it. I don't want to spoil too much of it. But I think what I'll do is I will kind of step back a little bit. Listeners love me to just be quiet and you just to tell your story. And then we'll dig in along the way to things that are of deeper interest, points of intersection, dig into those places there and go a little bit deeper. But for now, maybe just start as far back as you want to start with your own faith journey.
Sure.
Where does it begin for you?
Yeah, for me, it begins at a date I don't remember. Actually, I was baptized Catholic as an infant, but not raised Catholic. It was kind of a check the box kind of a thing. Like I didn't see a Catholic church other than a funeral on occasion or driving past it. Like that was the only time I went into a church or a wedding. But for me, my personal faith journey really began when I was a really young kid. I just loved Jesus. I was going to a Nazarene church with my family starting at around age 5. We started going to church regularly. And I loved Jesus. I felt like Jesus loved me. I think I still have the card where I filled out the little sinner's prayer thing, that I asked Jesus into my heart. I think I still have that. But for me, it was just something that was so easy and so natural and just became part of my childhood. I was deep into like the Jesus freak era, like DC Talk, Newsboys, Audio Adrenaline. So into my like teen years, I had a fervor for Jesus that was sometimes strange and quite a lot, just kind of didn't listen to secular music and just, I don't know, was really deep into the 90s Christian culture in the evangelical world. So ended up going to an Assembly of God youth group, and the people, like my friends there and the people at the church would talk in tongues. So I got comfortable being around that, even though I never really felt like I could talk in tongues. Like that really wasn't a thing. But I just consistently, even through like a lot of hard things in my life, like my parents getting divorced, a parent who was struggling with addiction, Jesus was always there. And that was just this thread in my life that I didn't really question until much later. So that's kind of like the synopsis, I guess, of my very early journey before Catholicism even entered the picture a little bit. Was just very evangelical, loved God, president of Bible club at high school, like just, all the things. The What Would Jesus Do bracelets,
yes,
everything. Yes. So that just was all there. And then after my freshman year of college, I ended up meeting a young man whose name was John Paul. And he was named after St. John Paul II and thought he was super cute when I met him that first time. And I remember going home and telling my mom, like, I met this really nice boy, but the only thing is he's Catholic. And she kind of was like, why is that a big deal? But somewhere along the way, I realized that I had inherited some anti-Catholicism just from people talking. I don't really remember, like there wasn't like a sermon that I remember that was like really anti-Catholic, but there was something inside me that I had just like taken into my own, that something wasn't quite right with Catholicism. And like, I knew some of those reasons. Some of them were they're too into Mary, right? Why do they need to go to confession when we can just talk to God ourselves and ask him to forgive our sins? All of the really common things that I think a lot of us had, like, why would Mary be ever virgin? Like, why did that matter? Why is that important? So that was all kind of there. And that wasn't enough to keep me from stop me from dating this guy named John Paul. So we started dating. I went to visit his family one time on this ski trip, and his whole family, it's this huge Catholic family, like just so many cousins, just everywhere, cousins everywhere. And they all went together in this room to pray at the end of the night. I think it might've been like the Divine Mercy Chaplet now, but at the time it was like a lot of Hail Marys and stuff I didn't understand. And I removed myself from that room and went upstairs into a bathroom and just like cried because I didn't know what they were doing. And I thought it was heretical. And I thought it was something other than Christianity. And it was very scary. Like it was kind of, just they're all saying the same thing in this monotonous tone. And I'm like from the Assemblies of God youth group, you know, there's people speaking in tongues and talking to Mary and like just none of it made sense. So that became really early on a struggle for us in our relationship. John Paul became my husband, JP. So like we're married now. But all throughout our dating, I was exposed to this Catholic family, and his aunt would like pull me aside at family gatherings and try and explain to me why Mary had to be ever virgin. And like, I just didn't get it and wasn't in a spot to really like internalize anything that they were saying to me at all. And when we got engaged, I actually entered RCIA at that point in time and dropped out because I just like, I couldn't handle like not literally interpreting everything in the Bible, all of the extra books in the Bible. There were so many things that they talked about that I was sola scriptura, like Bible alone, faith alone, all of that stuff. So I dropped out of RCIA and just thought this isn't going to happen for me. So we still got married. It was still to this day, like the thing we probably most frequently fought about was what were we going to do when we had kids? Like what church were we going to go to? I really kind of pummeled him with all of the questions, all of the arguments. And he really at that time wasn't really prepared to answer me. He grew up with the faith, just accepting it, probably a lot like I had just accepted my evangelical faith. And then we get engaged and married, actually Catholic wedding as well. So funny turn of events there. We didn't have a full mass, but we had a liturgy of the word, and we got married in the Catholic church at his college. So I look back and I'm like, oh my goodness, God was giving me these graces that I didn't even know I was getting. I was in a sacramental marriage. I didn't even know what a sacrament was. Like, really, I didn't really get it. Like, I got that it was serious, and I got that it was something more than just like a legal agreement. But did I have any deep understanding of sacramentality? Like, no, I didn't, because we didn't have anything tangible as evangelicals. Like, you know, we have things in the Catholic Church that we can touch, that we can taste, that we can hear, that, you know, like all of these senses get incorporated into these sacraments. And in my evangelical world, I was often chasing a feeling.
Yeah.
And it was so real. Like my faith was real, but I didn't have anything to hold on to. So I was often chasing this spiritual high that, you can't sustain. It was just something like I'd go to camp and I would have this spiritual high, and then it would fade, and I would think I did something wrong because like, why can't I just stay in that place? And even though I felt like I was once saved, always saved, like I still, like, how many times did I rededicate myself to Christ? And how many times did I get baptized? A couple more, I think, than my infant baptism. So, well, you know, I was living a life of once saved, always saved. Like there was this constant, the sense of like needing to keep coming back, even though I didn't really realize that was maybe a little bit incongruent with that idea, that one and done. So we got married and we had the Catholic wedding, and first year of marriage, just continually the thing that we fought about the most was our faith. For a while, we went to Catholic mass, and then we would go to evangelical church service, and we would go to 2 services on a Sunday to try and like support each other. But we kept wondering, like, what's going to happen when we have babies? Yeah. Like, what are we going to tell them? And what are they going to do? And what are they going to think is their faith? And what are we going to tell them is the right thing to believe? And it got to a point where I pushed so hard on these things, and my husband was so not like ready to answer the questions that I had, that he, for the sake of unity in our marriage, actually stepped away and stopped going to mass. And truly, like, he will say this, he's like in the other room right now, but he will say this, like, that he didn't know what he was leaving when he did that. He didn't know. If he had known what he was leaving, then maybe he wouldn't have done it. But also we kind of look back now and think, well, maybe that was something that had to happen to get me there in the long run to get me to be in union with the Catholic Church. And so he stepped away, and we ended up going to Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, which I argued was closer to Catholicism than anything I had done before. But that was like that type of traditional stuff without the stuff that I couldn't handle. So it didn't have the same devotion to Mary, right? Like it it had like consubstantiation, not transubstantiation. So it was close, but it didn't have praying to saints. So it took away the stuff that I was uncomfortable with, and it let us find what we thought at the time was possibly unity, because we both had kind of left a little bit of something to find some common ground. So we were Lutheran for a while, and had our first two kids in that setting. So they were actually both baptized as infants in the Lutheran Church. So we had Felicity as our oldest, and then August is our second. And it's funny looking back, because also all of our kids have saint attachments, and the first two we didn't even know we were doing it at the time. So that's another just little like thing that I think God wanted me to smile at looking back, because he knew where I'd end up. So we had our time as Lutherans. We moved due to my husband's work closer to Chicago, and we couldn't really find a Lutheran church that worked well for us. We ended up moving back to Wisconsin, and we ended up going to First Christian Church, which was a really nice church. It was very focused on social justice and service to others, and the church going out and actually helping the community, which was really, really beautiful. Ended up moving again. And then we found ourselves at a church that was pretty associated, I believe, with Baptist church. It was just, called one of your generic church titles, and it was affiliated with the Baptists. So we encountered for the first time the idea of predestination and Calvinism in that whole world. At that point, my husband and I had two kids, and we were, late 20s, like just adults, like not transitioning to adults, but we were kind of doing the grown-up thing, parents, and had jobs and all of that stuff. And we found a few things. One of the things that we found that I found was that I had a history in my life of leading worship. So at pretty much any church that I went to, I would sing for that church, and eventually would probably get to lead the worship for certain Sundays, or do backup or whatever. But sometimes I would lead. And these were often this went back to when I was 12 at the Nazarene church. I would lead worship. We didn't even have a band. We would put in a cassette tape and just sing over the main track. And then I moved to high school and was at the Assemblies of God church. And I was leading the high school, some of the songs in the high school worship team, and would sing sometimes solos on the Sunday, and then just keep it rolling. I would cantor at the Lutheran service. And I eventually ended up at these more contemporary churches, on a stage where there were lights and we had headsets and, there was a full band behind us, of people who knew how to play instruments pretty well. And so when we ended up at this Baptist influenced church, I started questioning if everything that I had grown up believing was actually true. And I think it was a moment for me of, is this faith a cartoon? Is it fake? Is it real? I was either going to hang on to it, or I was going to drop it as something that I grew out of. I just didn't know if it had any legs to stand on or any backbone, just as a religion as a whole. There wasn't really a lot of depth there for me. Even though I felt God throughout my life, at this point I wanted, is it historically true? Is it logically true? Is it possible that this stuff actually happened? And if not, then what am I doing? So we found ourselves going to church, but my husband was kind of in a similar place. And we found ourselves kind of living more like practical agnostics, but like going to church. Our faith didn't really influence our day-to-day other than we tried to be nice people, but my prayer life was nothing. I wasn't really reading the Bible because I had memorized it all when I was a kid. When I did Bible quizzing, like I knew it, but I wasn't in it. I wasn't reading it. And there was a certain Sunday where I was leading worship and I knew how to do all the things. Like I could raise my hands. I could get people, out in the congregation to raise their hands and close their eyes and feel something. But I'm singing these words and I'm helping people to feel something. And I'm thinking, I don't even know if I believe this. I am lying right now. I am a liar. And that was the moment I knew I had to step away from leading worship because it wasn't real. Like I didn't know if I actually believed it. And it was a lie for me to stand up there and get people to feel things at these songs if I didn't really know if I thought any of it was true. So I made up some excuse to recuse myself from the worship team and didn't tell the real reason, but I did the best I could at the time. I was just trying to get myself out of blatantly lying in front of a couple hundred people on Sunday. And we did a few other things at that time. We tried to go through the membership class for that church. And that was a really big one for us because we sat in there and the guy who was teaching the class did that classic thing, the two cliffs where there's a cross that they put in the middle of the two cliffs and then you walk across it and you're a Christian. So he drew that on the board. And so he drew the two cliffs and then he said Jesus, makes it possible for you to be in union with God. And he drew the cross and kind of had a little stick figure, that could walk across. And then JP stood up and went up to the board and he was like, but what happens if you've crossed and then you decide to cross back over to the first side of the cliff that you were originally on? And the guy who was teaching the class was like, you can't do that. And JP was like, but I think we're currently doing that. So that was when we both kind of realized that once saved, always saved wasn't the story we were living.
Yeah.
Because somebody could have asked me if I prayed that prayer when I was a kid. I lived Christian life. I lived it in my heart. I lived it with everything to the point that I was a weirdo sometimes. But then you fast forward us to our late 20s and I don't know if I believe it anymore. I don't think I do. And so I see us literally walking back over to the other side and knowing that is my lived experience and someone's telling me that's not possible. And I'm like, I think that's what we're doing. So we actually didn't complete that membership class because we couldn't actually say that we assented to certain things. And then there was the whole Calvinist, the total depravity thing, that the idea that we are just dung and Jesus covers us with a white sheet and then God can't see all of our, dung that is us. He just sees the white sheet, versus the idea that we're gold and we can sometimes be covered with dung. But what God can do is he can wipe away that and uncover the goodness and the beauty that is in there because of us being made in the image of God. So we realized pretty quickly as well that we were not Calvinists, that we did not believe in total depravity. Another big belief that they had was the idea of predestination and that certain people are just destined for heaven and certain people are just destined for hell. And the idea of that with free will and with God's love and all of those things just never really computed for me. So we didn't go through the membership class. And I eventually started looking into just trying to figure out if this faith was something that was real kind of on my own. And there was a really helpful book for me. It's by a Protestant pastor, Timothy Keller, and he wrote a book called The Reason for God. And that book really helped me reframe that childhood understanding of who God was into my grown-up understanding of that, I think this might actually be real. And so I read that book and that really helped. C.S. Lewis has always helped. He's great. And so then I found myself at this place where I was like, okay, I've kind of gone on this soul searching. I think this is true, but how do I live it then? How do I live this truth the most fully while I'm here on earth. And I started asking some very dangerous questions. I started asking questions like, what did the early church look like, for example? And that was a question I posed at our small group at the time. And no one could tell me what the early church looked like. And that started to really bother me. I thought, shouldn't we know though? Like, shouldn't we know what the early church looked like? And no one did. And no one seemed to really think it was an important question. And I started looking at this stage and these lights and these headsets. Not that there's anything like intrinsically wrong with any of those things, but the auditorium style. And I started wondering like, this can't be it though, right? like this can't be what the early church looks like. And I started to have a desire to find what that was. So at the same time, we had my husband, JP, very surreptitiously and secretively, he had a long commute at the time from where we lived to Chicago, and he was riding a train, and he started sneakily checking out theology books from the library where he was doing his postdoctoral fellowship, and several of them were Catholic. And so he's like on the train, like starting to read these Catholic books, but he didn't want to tell me what he was doing because it had not gone well, historically speaking. It had gone so poorly. So he's just like quietly feeling drawn back to the Catholic Church, right? So there was this one Sunday, and it is one of my favorite turning points in this whole journey. We were on a date. We were going out to dinner. Actually, right before this, the night before this, I was sitting on the couch after he had gone to bed, and I was thinking through all these things, like how much our faith was tied to emotion, how I did just so many things. Like I just didn't feel connection to history. I didn't understand like what the roots were, what the depth was, all these things. And all of these memories come flooding in of all of these random times. I was like at Mass with JP's enormous family, when I was with his like enormous set of cousins and his aunt and all these things. And something locked into place. And I thought, oh no, I am thinking like a Catholic. And that was a weird moment. Like I literally remember where I was sitting on the couch, just being like, I'm thinking like a Catholic.
Wow.
So everything flips from there. So we are out to dinner the next night, and it's snowing outside the restaurant. It's very pretty. And I had not prefaced this with anything with my husband at all, but I just said, it was like a Saturday night. And I said, would you want to go to Mass tomorrow instead? And he didn't even know what to do with himself, because that was very random coming from me, because he didn't know I was on this path either. And he was like, yes, I would like to go to Mass tomorrow. I would love to go to Mass tomorrow. And he couldn't believe it. Wow. And so I got home that night, and I sent a Facebook message to one of my only friends at the time who I knew was Catholic from this mom's group. And I was like, where do you go to Mass? And like, what time? And like, and so she, like, her and I are still friends. So she's told me like where they went to Mass and what time they would be there. And so we take our little evangelical family into Mass. And I just was like, okay, like for the first time, Mass didn't offend me. I was always so offended by it. Like I was offended by it. Why are we kneeling? Like, what are you kneeling in front of? It's, like, it's not right. Or I'm not included. How come I can't receive communion? I don't have I never had a problem with transubstantiation. So I was just like, why on earth would you not let me receive communion? And so that bothered me. So I always found all these reasons to be super offended. So I wasn't offended anymore. And we found some people after Mass, and I was like, how do I like get in here? Like, what do we do? And they were in the middle of an RCIA cycle, like, or just kind of, a little bit on the front end. And because of all of the research and things like I had been doing, they let me hop in to that class in December. So I text my sisters-in-law like that week, and I was like, guess where I am? I was like, I'm about to go to RCIA. And my sisters-in-law, who knew this whole journey, were just like, what? Like, what are you doing? Like, what? And so that was fun. They were really surprised, because their family had really been praying for like 10 years. Yeah. For me to convert, to become Catholic. And I was so offended by their prayers the whole time. Just stop praying for me. I'm fine. And just all of that. So they were really excited. I was really at a point where I was going to ask all the hard questions though, because I was believing and thinking, okay, this faith is probably true, but if it is true, it's probably here. And if it's not here, then it's probably nowhere. And so it was really kind of do or die for me because I understood the logic of it. And I understood that there was more depth to it than I had thought there was before. But if Catholicism turned out to not be the truth, then I didn't really think there was anywhere else for me to go.
Wow.
And then I would probably let it all go at that point. So I brought all of my questions. Brought all the hard-hitting questions, asked everything. I held nothing back in these classes. And I had really great teachers. And they answered every single one of them. And all of a sudden, it was like the light started like coming on and everything started shifting. And there were times when I would walk in for RCIA and they would have adoration going on in this chapel off to the side of the church. And I can't explain this as anything other than like God, because why would I want to go into a room where a piece of bread was displayed in a golden case? Like, why would I care? I wanted in that room. Like, I knew something was happening in that room that was really special. And something deep inside me wanted to be in that room. And there was no logical reason why I would want to be in that room. So that's actually where you come in. Yes. No. So I was reading all of these articles or looking for articles, right? Because it's good news. It was really helpful. So I found a lot of your blogs that you would write. And I loved the polite, like it just very like respectful tone, the cordial cat, you live up to the name, but like, it was logical and it was respectful and it made sense to me. So I like devoured all these articles that you wrote and, other converts wrote during that time because I was starting to feel fairly alone in our journey. No one else was coming with us. Like we were just doing this on our own. We got kicked out of our small group at the Protestant church. Like we weren't even allowed to say goodbye. We lost all of our friends. Wow. No one wanted to hang out with us anymore. So I was really lonely. So I would just constantly like Google like evangelical converts to Catholicism, like Catholic apologetics, all these things. And so your articles are really helpful. So I'm glad I get the chance to say thank you because
thank you.
Yeah. So they were great and they made a difference. And my mom also, I told her I was coming on your podcast and she was like, tell him I say hi. Cause she also read a lot of your articles too. She ended up getting confirmed a year after me.
I love your mom.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah. So I was her confirmation sponsor a year after my confirmation, which was great. So anyway, so I was reading these articles. I was on the Coming Home Network website a lot. I was watching a lot of Journey Home episodes and just feeling less alone in that, which was so nice. So we kind of got the whole process like done and through. And because I was baptized Catholic, I was able to go to confession and receive my first communion before my confirmation because I had those sacraments done. So that was great. And then I ended up getting confirmed in Minnesota, which is where most of JP's family lives. And all these crazy Savaryns who had been praying for me for 10 years, like packed the pews at the Cathedral of St. Paul and got to see me come into the Catholic Church, and then the aunt who made me cry was my confirmation sponsor, full circle. Yes. So I don't know, that brings us up to like, there's 7 years since then, but that brings us up to like the moment of my confirmation where I felt like everything that I had questions about got answered, where I felt like I finally was connected to the history of our church, where I understood what the early church practice and that Catholicism keeps and maintains so many of those beautiful things. The theological depth is there. I love the sacraments. I love confession. Now going to confession is one of my favorite things. Yeah. It's so healing and so beautiful. So that was kind of like, that's up till that day. But now I've had life since then too.
Oh,
Yes.
that's fantastic. There really are a lot of similarities to my own journey and my wife's journey and our family's journey. And I think that's kind of funny and strange. Way back even in high school with the cool, with, Newsboys, DC Talk, like
Yes.
let's do it. And I'm sure when you were on the journey home, which also is surreal, right? We can just have a little, debrief on that for a bit. You and I maybe off the air, but watching that show, I must have devoured 30 hours or something of that, or probably even more than that of that show. I used to, in the early days of YouTube, just consume those episodes all till like 3 or 4 in the morning sometimes before we had kids, just watch those over and over again. And I remember David Anders, who I'm a huge fan of, he had an amazing journey from Lutheranism, from Calvinism into the Catholic Church. And I watched his episode probably just 12 times, just his, because
Nice.
he so succinctly laid out his journey and why Luther was wrong, why Calvin was wrong, why it made no sense. And I love those. And then, of course, you had this experience too of then going on the show and kind of being like, well, what am I doing on the show? I'm not worthy of telling my story.
Yes.
But I'm thinking that then impacts other people. It's this weird, like, discipleship kind of process, which is so strange to think that others now watch your video and are doing what we used to do, right? That's wild.
Yeah, it is. And you never know who those people are in most cases.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of trusting that that's out there and available for whoever it will be helpful for. It was such a cool opportunity. I had originally just like sent in my written conversion story, and then I got an email back asking about going on the show. And I was like, what? Me? I used to be afraid of EWTN.
Yeah.
Like it was,
That's
so that was
amazing.
awesome.
That's
It was
amazing.
fun.
And you would have met Matt Swaim, probably, a fellow Nazarene Bible quizzer. So did you guys have a Bible quiz off when you met him? Because
we had a lot in common. I've actually never met him in person. He was out the week I was filming, but we've spoken a lot, and I was on the Coming Home Network podcast with him a couple months ago.
Yeah.
So we've like been in touch, and I think we share a lot of like the just like the Bible quizzing, the music stuff. Yeah. So we've definitely like talked. I would have loved to meet him in person one day, but at least we got to talk on the podcast.
I think you should do a Bible quiz off the two of you. Bring back Catholic Bible quizzing. I think this could be a thing. This could be a ministry.
It could be. We need it. We could have it, right?
We do. So I love that. Along the way, you hit these kind of points. I was Pentecostal in high school, so I can relate to the experience of the highs and lows of the charismatic kind of, the altar calls without the altar, which also is strange, right? But the idea to recommit yourself to Christ kind of over and over again, chasing that high of the youth, the youth group conventions and like the camps, and like you're pursuing that in the sense, in the umbrella that you are saved. You're once saved, always saved. And in those times you don't feel that way, right? And you and JP really hit that wall at one point. But I feel like in that umbrella, there are those moments of trying to chase that feeling of not feeling like you're saved because you don't have the emotional feelings, but knowing intellectually you're supposed to know that you're saved despite how you feel. And then of course, I love that the catalyst for you guys to begin to kind of step back and question things is hitting that kind of doctrine kind of square on, right? Realizing that, hey, we're kind of investigating this. How are we still saved? That's a really interesting way. I don't think I've heard that before on this show, of beginning to kind of question your kind of evangelical faith, realizing that maybe I don't think that I am saved anymore. That's really interesting.
Yeah, like I don't necessarily know that I believe God can be known. Like that was kind of where I was at. So how is that possible? Like if God had if I don't know, if something had happened to me in that moment, like I just wasn't there in terms of belief or faith or anything. And so that wall of once saved, always saved fell purely on personal lived experience.
Yeah. And I'm looking at my shelf over here for a book and I can't quite see it from where I am here, but I think it's by a guy called Paul Hackner, who was a Lutheran convert to Catholicism, who wrote a book about Luther. He was very schooled in Luther and wrote a lot of on Lutheran theology. And one of the things he uncovers in this book is the idea that when Luther cleaved himself from the Catholic Church, he had to then have faith in some kind of institution to know that he was saved. If you're once saved, always saved.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think Hackner says that Luther had faith in was his own faith. So if his own stalwart faith began to waver, he would then feel like he's not saved anymore. So it's this really weird thing of you have faith in God, but then you have to have faith in your own faith kind of commitment. And that sounds very similar to what you guys kind of began to bump into. And of course, if that's like one of the core kind of things that Luther, in the establishment of the Lutheran faith, of the Protestant Reformation, well, then of course, if that's not on solid footing, you can begin to kind of unwind that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it made so much more sense when I started viewing our faith as an infusion of grace over a lifetime and a transition and a journey towards sanctification that may not even be complete when you die, right? That's what we have purgatory for.
Yes.
So the idea that, like you can have times where you do something or you turn your heart away from God and that injures your relationship with God, but that you can turn back to God, and that hopefully as you go through life, you just let that love in more and more and more fully, ideally while we're still living here on earth, right? That's like our saints that we recognize. But if not, like our hearts need to be ready for love. We need to be ready for God. And so that's why we have that purgatory as a process to finish that sanctification if it's not complete. Like that just felt so beautiful to me.
Yeah.
And so it almost like I don't want to say took the pressure off, but kind of took the pressure off just in terms of like, I had to believe this one thing and that was it. And that I'm good. And it became more of a, not that I want to be lazy, but that I'm cooperating with God on this journey. So I had a more active role in it versus a much more passive role when you just pray the prayer and then let God, do whatever. But there just really wasn't this sense that I had to have an active role in my sanctification or that I could cooperate with my sanctification at all. And now it's like every day, like my heart chooses yes, or my heart chooses no, or throughout a day, my heart chooses yes, or my heart chooses no. So it's much more of a cooperative thing. And it's not like I'm toiling and laboring, working for my salvation in any sort of stress or guilt inducing way. It's this beautiful, just uniting with the sacraments and the graces of our faith and journeying hopefully to let love in fully as soon as possible. Like it's awesome. It's great.
Well, that's very well said. And I can resonate with that feeling. And I think that listeners can too, come from that kind of background, because I would, you would go to a Sunday morning service as an evangelical, and you'd sing worship songs, you would lead worship songs, whether you like felt it or not, which is, I think, also an interesting kind of insight to that whole experience, right? But you'd feel the feelings of worship and give God kind of that glory through song, and then pray, and then hear a sermon, right? And the sermon was meant to be the thing that builds you up for becoming more like Christ, for service, for mission. But there never was that, like you're saying, this sanctification kind of element to it, right?
Yes.
It was weird. Like I look back at it now and try to understand what I was thinking back then, but you're hearing a sermon and meant to then live that sermon out, meant to internalize it and become more like Christ and live a better Christian life and serve others and love God more. But there wasn't really like okay, so how? And how does that actually work, other than just reflecting on that sermon throughout the week and praying more and reading your Bible? Where the difference to me in the Catholic faith is the Mass is like that thing that's meant to actually tangibly like work on your soul, infuse that grace, like a spiritual kind of exercise, right? And of course, prayer is important, and the Bible is important, and the sacraments are important, and these things are important. It to me, that the whole process, though, that sanctification process is so much more explicit and intentional in the Catholic Church towards making saints than it ever was for me as an evangelical. It just makes a lot more sense.
It's like, world? Like you almost like once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's kind of like, I feel like it's like I'm in the Matrix, like, like once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I think those sermons in the evangelical church, it was like nice to do, right? It'd be like good to do, but it wasn't like if you didn't do anything, like nothing really, you're once saved, always, like it didn't really matter.
Yeah.
And so when we go to a confession or we go to mass and we enter into this space that removes the veil between heaven and earth for a little while, and we receive Jesus in the Eucharist, like that, like everything builds up to that. And I think that's like one of the big differences for me too, is that everything in my old church is built up to the sermon, and the sermon was like 30 minutes long, and that was what it was all about. And in mass, it builds up to Jesus. It builds up to the Eucharist. And then we take that and it's inside, and he's inside of us, and we carry that into our daily lives. Like that's just become such a part of the fiber of like who I am. And what's interesting is there was always some part of me that was drawn to communion. Yeah. There were times when I would be at a Protestant service and there would be the little cups of the juice and the little pieces of bread. And I would look at it and I would imagine it as the body and blood of Jesus. Like it meant a lot to me. I would sometimes cry thinking about it. And now I can see that it was a desire for the Eucharist, like inside of me, that I didn't even really understand what the Eucharist was then, but I would just look at that grape juice and I would imagine it as Jesus's blood. And so to know that that really exists, like I didn't know that really existed somewhere. And then when I did, and had access to that, like that, I don't know, just it filled something.
That's interesting, because for me, it was almost the opposite. I always hated communion because to me, I couldn't quite understand why we were doing this thing. Why once a month? And just the whole process, laborious, like the handing out of this and the passing along and the waiting. It's not really a rational dislike. I don't really know why I disliked it so much, but I always had this feeling of like, this doesn't feel right. I don't like this. And I attach that now to the fact that, well, because it wasn't the Eucharist. It wasn't what Christ said it was. And it makes sense in hindsight to me why I disliked it so much. But at the time, it was this really weird, kind of irrational, kind of, not this. It's this Sunday again. Like, oh, come on. But
yeah, it would make the service longer. Yeah, definitely.
I think it was this strange longing that I didn't really understand until it was satisfied in the actual Eucharist. And I can remember one time before I even became Catholic, just struck me as so strange listening to a Protestant, an evangelical pastor in the communion service before communion, reading the words of St. Paul in Corinthians, talking about, quoting Christ, "This is my blood, this is my body." And he changed the words. So he had his Bible there, but he read, "This is like my body. This is like my blood." And I went, wait a second.
Yes.
I know that's not what the Bible says. I know that's not what the scripture you're reading, that translation does not say like.
Oh my goodness.
That struck me as, wait a second. What are we doing here? And that was in some way a catalyst for beginning to unwind this thinking of, okay, but Christ didn't say like, but then why do we have to add that in there? Right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. There was actually a moment, we had a similar moment. Our kids had the Jesus Storybook Bible. And it was a very common Bible given out.
Don't get me started on that.
It was very commonly given out at our churches that we went to. And that also has that change where in the communion scene, he said, "This is like my body. This is like my blood." And this was like on our journey. So we were already like pretty much Catholic at that point. But I was like, nope, we're not. That's not. We're going to get a different kid's Bible because that's not the thing. It's always interesting. Certain of our churches would have an altar. Some of them still had an altar. Some of them didn't have an altar. Some of them, we'd only have communion once in a while. But it was just, there was always just something that wasn't full for me until I became Catholic. And then now we're like 7 years past my conversion, my husband's reversion. Obviously, he came with me back into it. 2 more kids. We have 2 kids who've had their first communions. And I'm so grateful that my kids have access to this at such a young age. Like, I know I had to go on my journey, but the fact that my 2 oldest kids have access to the Eucharist and confession at such a young age, like what a gift that they have those graces. And I'm so thankful for that, for them. there's a little part of me that's like, oh, I wish I could have had it that long, but I know I had to go on this story. This was my journey, but it's just really cool to see my kids already like leaning into the rhythms of our faith and asking to go to confession. And I work at a Catholic school, so we walk through the parish often to get to my classroom, and there's adoration sometimes. And it's no longer a piece of bread, in a golden container for me. So we'll go in and we'll just say good morning to Jesus for a couple of minutes. And there's just such roots in that. And to know that we're doing the same thing that Christians have been doing since the beginning of our faith, that we are a part of something that runs so deep and so far back. Like you can't replace that groundedness. You can't know what that is until you know what it is, almost. Like I didn't know what that was until I went there and had it.
Yeah, that is the challenge of this show for me for the last 4 years doing this podcast and blogging before that, is trying to express that you have to really, in a sense, begin to live it to understand the depth and beauty of that. It's very hard to articulate, I think, but there is that beauty in the roots and the groundedness and the history and the practice of the rich faith. We have the unique situation of, I became Catholic while my wife was pregnant. Go me, like what? Husband of the year, okay? And actually, in her first experience of Mass, she fainted. She's a fainter during pregnancy. We know this now in hindsight.
Oh my goodness!
She's fainted like once per pregnancy so far. It seems like, just whatever happens, the physics is the wrong word. The biology, the hormones, the body's doing things. She often will faint at least once of pregnancy.
Yeah.
And we didn't know that at the time, but this was the first fainting. And we're in Mass, and in the middle of Mass, her first experience of Mass, and all of a sudden she's going over on the gentleman next to her, and then kind of goes, whoa, what's going on? And we had to apologize. It was kind of funny because in hindsight now, her very first Mass, she fainted. It was just that bad.
Oh no.
But she became Catholic the year after me, began our CIA in like September of the year that I became Catholic.
Yeah.
And our son was born, was a newborn. I think the first time that I took care of him on my own was for her to go to RCIA when he was 2 months old or so, which is kind of cool. But we had him baptized just after she became Catholic. The priest said, no, wait, let her do RCIA first. So you're both Catholic, then baptize your son, and then you can baptize him as both Catholic. So we had this crazy history of, her and I met in evangelical church together. We served in that church together. We were married in that church. All our friends were in that church. But our kids will never know that church, right?
Yes.
Our son was baptized Catholic. They'll only know like the after, right? They'll never know the before. And it's so interesting raising our kids and seeing them now go through. Our oldest now just had his first communion, and he's now did his altar server training. So he's up there at the altar shortly. And it's so strange to see them embracing a faith that they've inherited through us as their parents, but we sought out and converted to and left a different faith that they have no idea about. It's a very strange kind of experience.
It is. Our kids are the same. Like I don't think, even our oldest, I don't think she has memories like other than like maybe vague memories of the church that we left to become Catholic. So like the bulk of their lives, like all of their lives, for especially like all the younger three and mostly for our oldest, is going to be in this faith, which is so great. And I don't know if this happened with you guys too, but the idea of how we live out our marital vocation changed a lot when we became Catholic. And I think that is making our family just as like a unit. So just, there's so much there. Like we view our call to be married couple to help each other grow in holiness, right? Like we're helping each other on the journey to heaven. And and we got really into like theology of the body, got like just another Matrix type moment that we're here to be gift to the other, that we're meant to live our lives as gift to the other, to will the good of the other is to love. The opposite of love is to use, like all of these things that respect the dignity of the human person that are allowing us to become better husband and wife to each other, which helps us become better parents to our kids. So they're growing up in a different family than they would have if I hadn't found my way to the Catholic faith, if JP hadn't found his way back, like our literal like family, like we have more children than we probably would have had. Like all of those things, there's more like literal humans here than there would have been, and how we relate to each other and how we view this vocation and how we raise our kids is all oriented toward raising our family for heaven. And that is the main thing, and respecting the dignity of the human person and showing them what actual love is. So when we send them out into the world, they know what that is. So they can recognize it when they see it, and they can recognize a counterfeit when they see it. And I just didn't have any of those things. Like we didn't have any of those tools before we came into Catholicism. Like it wasn't there to the same degree. So I don't know if you guys experienced that at all.
Well, the funny thing for us, this is my wife's story, not mine. I can't tell it too in depth. I don't know it that well, but she was talking with someone. So she met with some friends for quite a long time that we had made from our previous church experience. And the weird thing for us is that we were deeply rooted in this non-denominational church that we're married in. All our friends were there. We served in here. We actually served in the married couples ministry before we left this church. And we had all of our friends there, and we actually moved to a neighborhood with a lot of these friends to raise our kids together. And when we became Catholic, shortly after that, all the friends in our friend group began to fall away from the faith, which was crazy to us because we had pictured in our minds this life of living downtown in this beautiful, urban Canadian city, raising our kids together with our friends, going to this church, and we thought we had it all kind of figured out. And little did we know we'd become Catholic, but then all these friends we thought were such serious, faithful, like really deeply rooted evangelical Christians began to question their faith and began to become agnostic or atheists in some cases, began to attend kind of church less, began to get kind of distance themselves from religion, which was wild for us to experience that, because here we are digging more deeply into our faith, becoming Catholic, and all of our friends that we thought we were going to raise our kids with and alongside are actually leaving the faith. So that was weird. And then conversations for my wife began to revolve around, well, how do we talk to our kids about things like sex and living together and these things? And she mentioned one day after meeting with these friends, came home and kind of said, this is weird, because we have such a grounding as Catholics in theology of the body and can understand why and what we believe about sexuality and these kinds of things. And I'm listening to my friends talk about this, and they have crazy ideas like, well, I guess just let my kids experiment, or guess let them just figure it out. And of course they're going to do these. And it's crazy to think that there is that disparity, but then the beauty and the thank God we have theology of the body and the rootedness and the sensibleness. Like it is the Catholic faith makes sense, right? It's sensible, and these pieces fit together. Like I always say when I teach RCA to these candidates, I always say, like, the reason why the church like prays to saints and has relics and venerates Mary and says that Christ had a body and these kind of things is the same reason why the church says you shouldn't sleep together before you're married. Like all these different pieces, they might not seem sensible. They all fit together and come from the same wellspring. And if you dig into them, they fit together and they make sense, right? Opposed to this kind of like haphazard figuring out, well, why would I teach my kids this versus this? Like, thank goodness, right?
Yeah, I'm a big, stickler for logical consistency.
Yeah.
So if we're gonna say one thing, like I need to see it applied consistently throughout. And time again, that was one of the many things I saw with the Catholic faith. Like we ask saints to pray for us because we ask anybody to pray for us, and they have more time. They don't have dishes to do, right? They're there, like they're available. Just like my husband prays for me. Like I can ask the saints, to pray for me. I have a Saint Anthony candle behind me because we lose a lot of things in our house. But yeah, it's with those answers for our kids, especially as our kids are starting to get older, I don't feel nervous about those conversations at all, because we went through the journey of theology of the body and the Catholic teaching on human sexuality and the whole person. Like a few years ago, that was actually part of my post-conversion journey, was understanding NFP, understanding theology of the body. JP started reading theology of the body and just started changing in the way that he related to us as his family members. And there was a point where I was like, what are you doing? What's gotten into you? And he was just really becoming much more selfless and self-giving in everything, with our kids.
I need that book.
Yeah, it's great. It was so helpful. So he and he was like, well, I'm reading this book called Theology of the Body. And I was like, what's that? And thus began that journey for us. But when our kids ask those questions, we're ready for them. We've seen how it's changed our marriage and our family life. And we see what happens when we have friends who don't have that. We've seen a lot of the devastation that can come from not understanding those really basic things. And so we just have so much that we can share with them when they're ready for it. And it's so nice to just know that that is there. And that's an ongoing conversation. It's a way of living, really, is to view every single human person with that dignity, and that humans, we are never an object of use, and we should never use someone as an object of use. And that what love actually is, all of those things, it's just all there. And I'm so excited to raise my kids in it and to have it. I believe I've read some books recently from some evangelical people who they're kind of starting to get there a little bit. There have been a few books that I've read or that I've seen. I actually have one that just came out for for parents talking to their younger girls about it, called She Deserves Better. And it's kind of unpacking some of the harmful messages that the evangelical community kind of had passed on, especially to girls and to guys. And so they're getting there, but they don't have all of it yet. There's pieces of it there. But it seemed like a positive momentum for me, but it just, so thankful for that teaching. Yeah. I could talk about theology of the body for a really long time.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. One thing that was for us a kind of cornerstone of our own conversion was seeing this family therapist, right? So one of the things that we did in our conversion was to talk to a therapist about what was going on with our relationship in our marriage. And we ended up trying to find a neutral guy to talk about this stuff with, and ended up being not neutral whatsoever. We learned it was a Mennonite therapist who had an axe to grind. I feel like it turned out. And one of the things that he asked us in the counseling session, we were paying hundreds of dollars for, so I feel like we were maybe getting ripped off in this particular circumstance. But he said to me, why is you want to become Catholic? Okay. And I said, well, I'm looking for the roots of the church is what I'm looking for. And he said to me, why is older better? And at that time, I was being challenged by a guy in authority, this therapist. Yeah. I didn't really know what to say. The funny thing is that later on, we had a couple more sessions with him, and then we kind of let him go for lots of reasons. But the more he challenged me, the funny thing is, the more my wife began to stick up for me in these sessions. And the more she began to have to explain Catholic doctrine and dogma and my thinking of conversion to this therapist. We were paying, okay, again, why, right? But so that was a turning point for us, because she began to then be able to explain what I was thinking. And in the education field, this is then that next level of knowledge, when you can then explain to somebody what you've learned and know. So that was cool. But that question for me for a long time stuck with me. Why is older better? And I couldn't answer it then, but I'm thinking of, you mentioned looking into the early church and kind of going, okay, well, what did the first Christians believe, right? As a catalyst for your journey. And then you begin to unwind the history of what you think your faith was, and the history of how the church used to be. That small group you mentioned, where no one in the small group could explain how the early church lived. And you go, what, shouldn't we know this?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And the long history you mentioned too of the Catholic faith, and that rootedness of that tradition, that practicing the faith that we've always kind of practiced, like this beautiful
Yes.
Catholic liturgy and the Mass. I wonder if you could answer that question, like how you would answer that if somebody asked you, okay, so why can't I just be evangelical? Why can't I just be Protestant? Why is a more rooted church better?
Yeah, I think I would kind of turn it back. I've actually thought about this a lot, and ask that person to help me understand where the early church was wrong.
Yeah,
because we have really early writings of belief in the Eucharist. Like there's very, very early, in terms of history, writings of that. So if they're so close to the original event and they believe this, how come we're more right than they were? And that happens in a lot of different areas, right? Like devotion to Mary, like there's just these early things. So I think for me, it did become more of a like almost like, I feel like that question almost needs to be defended by the one trying to defend the newer ways. Like, why was the original stuff? Why was that stuff in those first couple centuries? Like, why was that wrong? And if it wasn't, then why are we not still doing it? So yeah, I've thought about that too. I like to think things logically through.
Yeah, absolutely. I should have asked him. Well, a Mennonite guy. Okay, why was Zwingli right then to do what? Yeah, especially when nobody else in the Reformation liked him, because they were persecuted by everybody.
Yeah,
no, that's interesting. Yeah. I don't want to keep you too long here. Maybe one more question for you, if you have a second.
Yeah,
just to reflect on, maybe because you had your conversion. You've had a lot of time since then. You've mentioned theology of the body, these kind of the rhythms of the Catholic faith, reconciliation, the Eucharist, things that you've grown to appreciate even more since conversion. I know for us, it's just the having more kids for us and raising them in Catholic and seeing these different things. And now for us, brand new, this year is seeing our son go through First Communion and the beauty of his excitement of that, and the experience of teaching him about that and watching him walk through that, and the excitement of his friends at church for him to receive that. One of his little friends was altar serving that Mass, who's a year ahead of him.
Aww,
and the
great.
joy when he walked in of his friends, like, hey buddy, today's the day, this is so exciting. Like that for us is the unexpected graces of becoming Catholic, is now raising our kids that way and passing on these traditions. So you've also touched on that a little bit, and you write on that in beautiful stuff on the blog that you guys run. It's fabulous. But what would you say if you had to boil down maybe to one or two things like that you've come to love since your conversion?
Yeah, maybe two. One is just, I can't even, the richness with which I appreciate how tangible our faith is. Like it cannot be understated. I can touch the bread. I can taste it. I can drink the wine. I can hear I am forgiven. When I confess my sins, I can audibly hear that my sins are forgiven. I can smell the incense. And I think for me, that connection to our physical nature, like I can touch the holy water, right? Like our physical nature, like in these we are bodies, right? We are bodies and souls, composite. Yeah. So the Catholic faith, for me, understanding and appreciating that more, just really unifies those things. For me, for most of my evangelical life, it was very much a soul thing. Yeah. And in the Catholic faith, my body and my soul can both experience this faith in really rich and unique ways. And so that's one. And then I think the other one would be a pretty recent development for me. I've recently started seeing a spiritual director. It's one of the priests at our parish. And there was a time after I converted, honestly, for a period where I didn't do a lot of individual Bible reading, almost because that had been my faith. Like that had been like what I had. I had the Bible, and that was the thing. And so when I became Catholic, I had all these other things too. And there's a ton of Bible in the Mass. Like, I mean, for all the jokes about Catholics not reading the Bible, it's like, there's so much Bible in every Mass. It's like, it's hilarious how much Bible's in there. But like, I kind of stepped away from that personal interpretation of the Bible, because like that, I was so scared of being inaccurate at interpreting the Bible wrong, because I didn't have really a historical or integrated context for it. So I kind of read my own stuff into it as an evangelical, just because that was what we did. That was all we had. We didn't have an authority. We didn't have a magisterium. We didn't have anything other than this book. And so fast forward to recently when I'm seeing one of our priests at our parish as my spiritual director, and he has helped me start to dig in a bit into like Ignatian prayer and putting myself in the scenes of the scriptures, and then, like reflecting on that and writing about that. And I'm reading the Bible again as a part of that, because I'm literally reading stories from it and trying to imagine myself in the scene and trying to observe what's happening and where I am and who I am in the scene. And it has just caused my prayer life and my Bible it's come alive again. But I feel like I almost needed that break to come back and like put it in a context that was helpful for me. Like I needed to heal a little bit, reset, reframe. And then now is like the time that I can have that. So the Ignatian style of prayer, I know it's not like only Catholics can do that, but it's been introduced to me through my spiritual director. And it's just one more thing that's making a huge difference and helping me grow closer to God in ways I didn't really, like that personal way that we know as former evangelicals, right? Like that's back again. So that's really great.
That's awesome. I love you mentioned too the tangible. I can, when COVID hit and churches closed, I had a lot of evangelical friends who are no big deal, but in a sense, no big deal, right? And wrote blogs that were kind of like, guys, chill out. Like churches are closed. We're okay. We're still Christian. We'll be fine. But I would react to those articles viscerally, and I had to kind of step back from Facebook for a bit when some friends were posting these things. So I was like, no, that's fine for you guys. You guys don't get it though. Like as Catholics, that was kind of a big deal when the parishes were closed, because you realize how much you loved and drew from the physical, tangible, receiving the from the chalice, receiving the host, or the bread, the wine, like that. You realize when it's gone, wait a minute, that was integral to my faith. But the evangelicals, it didn't get it the same way, right? That was
you could have the sermon still virtually, but we couldn't receive the Eucharist virtually. And that actually delayed our daughter's first communion. We had to we had to go out of state to find a mass for her to have her receive her first communion. But I cried. Yeah. I would watch the virtual mass, and we'd do, like a spiritual communion thing, and I would just cry. Yeah. Because I was devastated to not be able to be there. And we were in a place where it took a long time for our churches to open their doors again. And that was painful. I was so happy to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, this has been awesome, an awesome conversation, and we can go on for a long time because there's lots of parallels we didn't even dig into. I mean, there's lots that we could talk about, but we'll be here for a long time. So we'll leave it there for now, and to be continued maybe on theology of the body could be a whole 2 hours on that topic.
Sure could.
Amazing. But thank you. This has been really fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Really enjoyed this. I think listeners will love hearing your story too. It's a great one, and want to hear more from you. So I wonder where you want to point them towards to find more things that you are doing, your books, your blog, those kinds of things. I'll put those links in the show notes, but where do you want to point them towards, Lorelei?
Yeah. So just for general family life Catholic things, I started our blog, thiscatholicfamily.com, right around when I was converting to kind of process things. And now it's become a life and faith thing. I'm also a regular contributor for Catholic Mom. So I have an article there once a month, pretty usually, sometimes a little more, but usually once a month is good for that. And then my 2 books are both by me, Edge of In Between, The Circus of Stolen Dreams. The Edge of In Between is a deeply Catholic book. It is a retelling of The Secret Garden. And I literally kept waiting for my publisher, which is Penguin Random House, like very big secular publisher, to email me. I was like waiting though for them to email me along the editorial process and be like, I need you to tone down the religious elements of this book. And that email never came. So I got to publish it in its full of Catholic allegorical glory. And so I wrote that to bring goodness and beauty and truth into an arena where we don't get to see that as often these days. So you can find my books anywhere books are sold or online as well.
That's awesome. I love that you snuck that. I mean, that's That's cool. They didn't get it. They're like, oh,
No.
this is really, really good.
Or
Like,
it rang true somewhere deep inside them.
Yes.
And they just let it fly.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. That's cool. Well, I'll put those links in the show notes, Lorelei. And thank you so much for being here. This has been awesome. I want to say God bless you, the awesome work that you're doing for the church. And thanks for this conversation. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for having me.